Hey everyone. So since the beginning of this whole Iran saga, whichever uh, point you want to start at, you can start at the 12-day war last year, or you can start in January with the protests, or you can start in February 28th when America launches Epic Fury. Wherever you want to start it, in this whole narrative that we've been following with all of the different side characters in the story, China has kind of been hanging around in the background. We haven't talked about them all that much. I have talked about them in a number of videos on this channel in relation to Pakistan. I've talked about how closely intertwined Pakistan and China are, how closely coordinated they are. Their own foreign minister said, during that whole period where Pakistan was the main intermediary, the negotiator, bringing up, and they're still playing the role of negotiator. I mentioned that the Pakistani foreign minister openly said that everything that he's doing in this is closely coordinated with Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, in this video, I want to go deeper into China's involvements in the Middle East, which have ramped up significantly in the last few days, really just the last few weeks. Very, very recently, China has ramped up their involvement in various Middle Eastern countries, or at least been more public about it. And what's more, they kind of returned to the main stage of the whole U.S.-Iran war because of the new economic initiative of Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, what he's leading with this whole new sanctions regime that the Americans are imposing on anyone who does any business with China. So let's go through these headlines, and we're going to paint a whole picture of China's recent moves and recent involvement in the Middle East, and we'll see how what conclusions we can draw from it. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's read the news. Here we go. This is from the BBC, and it's from today. China hits out at illegal new U.S. sanctions on Iran and trading partners. China has vowed to protect its interests after the U.S. announced plans to widen economic sanctions against Iran and its trading partners, which include Beijing. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian said China was firmly opposed to what it called illegal unilateral sanctions and would take all necessary measures to safeguard its rights. Lin said cooperation between China and Iran has always been conducted within the framework of international law and should not be interfered with or disrupted. However, responding to a question, and now it's talking about Scott Bessent, who said that, talked about this new sanctions regime, that any countries that do business with Iran would be sanctioned. Responding to a question about Chinese banks, Bessent said he wanted to make clear no one was above the reach of U.S. sanctions. In other words, China is no exception. The announcement comes ahead of planned talks between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping next month. Interesting. We're going to have another summit meeting between them. We had one not long ago. We had one just after the ceasefire went into effect. What was it, in May? Washington is likely to be wary of potential retaliation from Beijing, which processes the majority of the world's rare earths and other critical minerals, crucial in the manufacture of many high-tech products. China's response, the response we led this story with, followed Iranian economy minister Ali Madanizadeh saying Tehran was fully prepared for the wider sanctions, which he said would lead to another defeat for the U.S. The government is and was ready and has a 2-year plan to manage these events, he told state television. And then he says, yeah, we know how to play this game. Here we go. With the announcement of new sanctions, the U.S. Treasury Secretary claimed America was no longer managing the Iranian threat. We are ending it. Okay, so I talked about that yesterday, that the rhetoric has changed and the Americans are now openly talking about bringing down the regime. Iran is already under heavy sanctions from the U.S., but Bessent said these go further. He said Treasury had mapped financial channels, facilitators, and networks used by Iran to evade sanctions to trade oil, imposing sanctions on almost 60 entities, individuals, and vessels. But analysts had cast doubt on the latest measures even before China's response. Quote, "We suspect that the new package will only will have only a limited direct impact on Iranian energy flows in the short term. And this is from this expert David Oxley at Capital Economics. This is partly due to the fact that roughly 90% of Iran's oil goes to China, he said, which has not recognized U.S. sanctions in the past and is unlikely to be cowed this time either. We raised this question when this whole sanctions thing was announced a few days ago, that a big question that we're going to be watching is, will China participate? The answer was obviously going to be no, but also would there be exemption, would there be exceptions to the American retaliation against countries that cooperate with Iran? Because if what Besant said is correct and there's no exceptions, and China is saying openly, we're not going to honor this, and they buy 90% of Iran's oil, and they're doing all this trade with Iran. We know about the overland trade routes through Pakistan that China is sending goods over through, and Pakistan is part of China. They're joined at the hip. So it's a big question about how enforceable this whole thing really is. Ali Vaez, deputy director of the Middle East and North Africa program at the International Crisis Group, said, quote, generally, the Chinese are against unilateral sanctions. They would comply with multilateral or international sanctions, but unilateral sanctions just imposed by the U.S., they have always seen that as illegitimate. And although Iran's neighbors like Pakistan, Turkey, and Iraq want to maintain good relationships with the U.S., they can't really afford to cut off ties with Iran. There you go. So that's that. That is that situation. So let's take a look at this next story. So that's about the current sanctions that the U.S. is putting on, and China has thrown down the gauntlet and said we are not participating in this, and they're by far the biggest trading partner with Iran. So there's that. And now we have to see how the Americans respond. Does Secretary Besant, does President Trump make good on this? Does America now take serious action economically against China? Is that what this is turning into? Well, but take a look at this headline. This is a seemingly unrelated story, but in the context of where I'm going in this video, I'm going to share with you a number of different ways that China is getting more involved in the Middle East. So here we had this meeting. This kind of flew under people's radar. It was yesterday. This is a story from yesterday. China, Jordan call for upholding U.S.-Iran truce, restoring Hormuz passage. See, Jordan's King Abdullah was in China yesterday. China and Jordan have said the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran should be maintained and that normal passage through the Strait of Hormuz should be restored in a joint statement reported by China's Xinhua news agency. China and Jordan said a comprehensive solution capable of eliminating the root causes of regional tensions. What are the root causes of regional tensions? How do you eliminate them? Whenever they say, we want to solve the root causes of the tensions in the Middle East, as far as I can tell, the root causes of the tensions in the Middle East is that you have jihadists who are committed to jihad and Islam taking over the world and destroying the state of Israel. These are the root causes. There'd be peace in the Middle East tomorrow if they stopped trying to destroy Israel and stopped funding terrorism. But that's not what they mean in this. In a statement like this, when China and Jordan say that they want to eliminate the root causes, they're talking about Israel. So they want a comprehensive solution capable of eliminating root causes of regional tensions, and that should be reached through dialogue and negotiations. The two also expressed deep concern over Israel's dangerous escalatory actions in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Dangerous actions like building homes for Jews in the land of Israel. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Jordan's King Abdullah II bin al-Hussein in Beijing on Monday. Chinese Premier Li Qiang also met King Abdullah in Beijing to discuss avenues for strengthening bilateral relations in key economic sectors, the Jordanian royal court announced on X. During the meeting, the Jordanian king highlighted China's role as a vital economic partner, affirming that Jordan has much to offer in bilateral cooperation and that substantial opportunities exist to expand mutual trade and investment. China serves as Jordan's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade volume reaching around $6.7 billion. Turning to regional developments, Wang emphasized, this is talking about Wang Yi, who is their foreign minister. He emphasized that the Palestinian issue remains central to Middle East stability and must not be marginalized. He called for continued dialogue towards securing a lasting ceasefire in Gaza, while Safadi stressed, I would like a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. That's only going to happen when Hamas stops, is gone. While Safadi stressed the necessity of a two-state solution. Safadi is this, he came with King Abdullah. He's the Jordanian foreign minister. He stressed the necessity of a two-state solution and welcomed China's support for peace efforts. Okay, and then we have this, China's Xi says Palestinian issue is the heart of the Middle East affairs. So this is coming now from Xi, not just from his foreign minister, that it's a core issue for the Middle East. Xi called for a political solution, the resumption of peace talks between the Palestinians and Israel, and for the swift realization of Palestine's establishment as an independent state. Okay, so we have item number one is that the Chinese have no interest in cooperating with Trump's sanctions. Item number two is this meeting between Xi Jinping and Abdullah, and it mentions in there, buried in this piece, is that China is Jordan's largest trading partner, which is interesting because Jordan is also very much in the American orbit. America has a major Air Force base and a second training base in Jordan, and really provides for Jordan's security. Jordan has a peace treaty with Israel. Okay. And meanwhile, China's Xi Jinping is talking about a Palestinian state. World's second most powerful military draws Africa's strongest closer as it stages drills with Thailand and Belarus. So what's this story? This is from Business Insider Africa edition. And this is about China doing joint drills together with Egypt. In August 2026, the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force conducted simultaneous drills with Egypt, Thailand, and Belarus, showcasing its ability to deploy forces overseas while strengthening partnerships with strategically important countries. The drills coincide with a wider shift in North Africa's security landscape as the region's major militaries strengthen defense ties with global powers, with Egypt deepening cooperation with China, Morocco with the United States, and Algeria with Russia. I made a video about Morocco a little while ago, was it last month, where I talked about Morocco being a very strong ally of the U.S. The China-Egypt Eagles of Civilization 2026 air exercise brings together two expanding defense partners with drills covering air combat tactics, air superiority operations, combat search and rescue missions. Now, think about this. This is Egypt. Egypt is a major recipient, I think second to Israel in terms of annual aid, although Israel's aid is going to be drawn down, and Israel's aid is it's only military aid. But Egypt is I think the number 2 recipient of aid from the United States every year. Here it says that they're getting closer to China. We also know that the Chinese already control much of the Suez Canal. The ports in the Suez Canal are basically owned and operated by the Chinese Communist Party at this point. The exercise highlights Beijing's growing military engagement with Egypt, home to one of Africa's most powerful armed forces and a major regional player with an air force equipped with American, French, and Russian aircraft. Its strategic location, control of the Suez Canal, and influence across the Middle East and Africa have made it a key partner for competing global powers seeking influence in the region. The exercise follows the first Eagles of Civilization training held in 2025. I made a video about it on the Israel 365 news channel at the time, about that exercise between Egypt, the Air Force, the joint exercise between Egypt and China in 2025, when China deployed a full Air Force package to Egypt, including J-10C fighter jets, KJ-500 airborne early warning aircraft, refueling aircraft. I want to jump down here. This is the key passage in this piece. Look at this. China's growing defense relationship with Egypt is unfolding as North Africa's major military powers deepen ties with different global players. Morocco has strengthened its defense partnership with the United States, becoming one of Washington's closest security partners in Africa. Though exercises such as African Lion and through exercises such as African Lion, that's a joint exercise between the U.S. and Morocco, and major acquisitions, Rabat has expanded its military capabilities with systems including the F-16 Block 72 fighter jets, Apache helicopters, and HIMARS rocket systems. Meanwhile, Algeria, Morocco's regional rival, has maintained deep military ties with Russia, which has historically been its main defense supplier. It talks about what Algeria has from the Russians. Egypt, despite maintaining defense ties with Washington and Moscow, appears to be moving closer to Beijing as it explores Chinese military technology, including the J-10C fighter jet and other advanced aviation and unmanned systems. So you see that Egypt is moving more and more into the Chinese military orbit. It's not just about trade anymore. And then we have this, and this one is, you might be thinking, what? The UAE? We love the UAE. China, UAE to hold Falcon Shield 2026 joint Air Force training. So not only are the Chinese having a joint Air Force drills with Egypt, they're also having one with the UAE. And this is a story from 4 days ago. This is a recent story. The Air Forces of China and the United Arab Emirates will hold the Falcon Shield 2026 joint training in Hotan, Northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the Chinese Ministry of National Defense said on Friday. Okay, so they're going to be having a joint drill. And now we have this. This is, now, full disclosure, this website I'm about to read from, called islamtimes.com, is not officially affiliated with the Iranian regime, but it's a pro-Iran, pro-resistance axis website. Okay, so take it with that grain of salt. But nevertheless, there's some important analysis in this piece. Okay, and the title of the piece is, and let me just tell you when this is from. This is from today. This story, I think it's from today. I can't find the date on it. I believe it's from today. Oh yeah, here it is. No, it's from yesterday, Monday, August 24th. Here we go. China in America's backyard. This is more than just a military exercise. So let's read it and remember what we're reading. Okay, we're reading pro-Iranian media, but that doesn't mean the analysis is all wrong. Let's read what they have to say. Amid Washington's efforts to reshape global security equations, and as public attention remains focused on the consequences of Western-led wars, from Ukraine to the Persian Gulf, as well as the ongoing occupation and crimes of the Israeli regime, China is gradually redefining its security role alongside its economic influence in the international system. Signs of this shift can be seen in Beijing's expanding military ties with countries that have traditionally been considered part of the U.S. camp. So they're laying it out there. And again, it's biased media, but they're saying what the strategy is, that the United States it's got all these wars going on, Ukraine, Israel, they call that a United States war, Iran, the Persian Gulf, and China is redefining its security role alongside its economic influence, because China for a long time kind of stayed out of the military stuff and its main global reach was economic. But now what they're saying is that China is also getting more involved in a security role. And signs of the shift can be seen in these things. So China and Egypt began the joint exercise Civilization Eagles 2026 on Saturday, a couple days ago, at several Egyptian air bases. At the same time, China's defense ministry announced a joint Air Force exercise with the UAE. The exercise will run from late August to mid-September. Given Egypt and the UAE's strategic ties with the United States, these developments are more than routine military events. They could signal growing doubts among Washington's allies about the effectiveness of the U.S.-led security model. Now, that could be the whole point of these exercises, is a way of poking the Americans and signaling that American hegemony is waning. That might be even why they do it. Europe's emphasis on strengthening its own security capabilities, regional efforts to build independent alliances, and the expansion of military ties with Eastern powers all point to the same gradual shift. In other words, they're saying that Europe's move to start spending more on their own defense, strengthening their own security capabilities, and not just relying on the Americans, and then regional efforts to build independent alliances. What does that mean? When you see, let's say, the Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia alliance, when you see these things, they're saying that this is all a signal that they're shifting away from reliance on the United States of America. Arab countries that have moved closer to China and Russia politically and economically in recent years are now showing signs that this shift is extending to the military sphere. Very interesting sentence. Because a lot of Arab countries have been very much in bed with the Chinese economically, but they haven't shifted there militarily so much. Like, take, for example, the UAE or Egypt. I mean, these are the examples they give, but this also applies to, look, think of an example like Qatar, right? Qatar has extensive ties with China, but militarily, they're purely in the American orbit. Militarily. How about that Jordan meeting? I mean, we just saw them talking about a Palestinian state. Abdullah did not fly out to China to talk about a Palestinian state. Okay, what else was going on in that meeting between Abdullah and Xi Jinping? China's military exercises with Egypt and the UAE can therefore be viewed as part of a broader trend in which regional countries are seeking to diversify their strategic partners rather than relying entirely on the U.S. security umbrella. Joint military exercises with Iran, Pakistan, Russia, and now Egypt and the UAE, together with Beijing's stated readiness to help ease tensions around the Strait of Hormuz. What does that mean? How are they going to ease tensions? What it means in this context is breaking the blockade, providing goods to Iran, shipping things in there so that they're easing the tension for the Iranians. It indicates that security is no longer merely a regional concern for China. It is gradually becoming an integral part of the country's global role. So that's what this piece is messaging, that China's changing its posture globally, that it's no longer just going to be playing this economic leadership role, that it's now also going to begin playing a security leadership role. These developments should be viewed within the broader context of changes in the international system. The prolonged wars led by the United States, its insistence on unilateralism, and the high costs of dependence on a single security provider have prompted many countries to reconsider their strategic calculations. China's exercises with Egypt and the UAE in this context are not merely military drills. They could be signs of a gradual shift in the balance of power, a shift that begins with declining confidence in the U.S. security model and moves towards a more multilateral, independent order shaped by the new realities of global power. So that's where they're pushing towards. That's where the Chinese are pushing towards. And that leads us to the final story we're going to look at, which is, I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, the Saudi-Turkey-Pakistan pact, right? The Mecca agreement that was signed a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, what is it, a week and a half ago, however long ago it was signed. And there was a piece there, and this is from August 13th, from when it was signed. And look what it says. 3 ways China benefits from the Saudi-Turkey-Pakistan pact. What to know. And let's see what they say in here. China has not officially endorsed the pact, but its state-run Xinhua news agency highlighted the agreement as a response to rising regional security concerns. More broadly, the pact fits Beijing's long-running argument that Middle Eastern states should play a leading role in shaping regional security rather than relying on an external power. In other words, get America out of there. China has promoted what it calls common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, while arguing for a regional security architecture less dominated by outside actors, less dominated by the U.S. There are 3 ways that Beijing could benefit from the agreement. Number 1, diversification away from the United States. That's what we've been talking about. Yun Sun, senior fellow and director of the China program at the Stimson Center, told Al Monitor, so far, the pact has been viewed positively by China because it represents a diversification of security arrangement in the Middle East, which diminishes the central role of the U.S. as the security provider. This does not mean Beijing is looking to replace Washington as the region's security guarantor. They're not interested in that at all. China doesn't want to guarantee anybody's security. Even the official agreements they have where they claim to guarantee people's security, they don't honor. We saw that with Iran. They never came to Iran's defense, even though they have a strategic, a 25-year strategic pact with them that calls for them to help them. It doesn't say exactly how they would help them, but they didn't lift a finger. China lacks both the regional military presence. I mean, they didn't lift a finger militarily, security-wise. China lacks both the regional military presence and so far the appetite to take on that role, exactly as I just said. But a more diversified security landscape could give Beijing more room to deepen relationships that are already expanding across the region. For China, the opportunity is as political as it is military. A region in which the Gulf states diversify their defense partnerships can be more receptive to Chinese diplomacy, arms sales, technology, and investment without requiring Beijing to provide the kind of alliance guarantee that Washington has long supplied. This is the punchline. Let me say it again. Here's what they're saying in this line. It's a good piece of analysis. When China making more moves to say that we're also, we're engaging in these joint drills and we're encouraging these alliances. In this case, in this particular article, it's talking about the Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan alliance. That's good for China because if there's security arrangements, the more security arrangements there are between countries that have nothing to do with the United States, the less everyone is tethered to American policy. So by China going in there with, and engaging with U.S. partners, U.S. security partners, traditional ones like Egypt and the UAE and Jordan, engaging with them and moving that engagement beyond economics, but into security, without saying that we're going to protect you or replace America, but also having them sign agreements between each other that don't involve America. This all serves Chinese interests because it makes it easier for those nations to do things independent of America, like buy weapons from China and investment and technology and diplomacy, etc. That's what it means here. So this is what China wants. Number two, the Pakistan card. And I told you about how closely linked Pakistan and China are. So here we go. Pakistan is one of Beijing's closest defense partners and a major recipient of Chinese arms. The two countries have developed extensive cooperation ranging from fighter aircraft and submarines to joint drone production. For example, Pakistan's JF-17 fighter aircraft, which serves as the backbone of its air force, was jointly developed by the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex and China's Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group. In other words, Pakistan's main fighter aircraft that is a joint project of Pakistan and China, right? Like Israel has joint projects with the U.S. military industry. Pakistan has joint projects with the Chinese. Pakistan is also the only nuclear power in the pact. Given China's overwhelming influence over Pakistan, this indirectly contributes to the increase of Chinese influence because now one of their proxy nations, Pakistan, which is also nuclear, is in this pact. During a May meeting with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Chinese President Xi Jinping hailed China's relationship with Pakistan as unbreakable. Saudi Arabia has expanded military and economic cooperation with China in recent years. In March, reports indicated that Riyadh and Beijing had reached a $5 billion agreement to establish a production line for Chinese Winglong 3 combat drones in Jeddah. Do you get this? In March was the height of epic fury. While America is fighting Iran and has bases in Saudi Arabia is getting shelled by Iran, and they're ostensibly on the American side of this whole thing. Meanwhile, Riyadh and Beijing are reaching a $5 billion agreement for a production line for combat drones to be manufactured in Saudi Arabia. Neither government has publicly confirmed the arrangement, but such a deal would mean a shift from Saudi Arabia simply purchasing Chinese equipment toward producing Chinese equipment locally, deepening Beijing's footprint in the kingdom's defense industry. And the third gain of what China gains from the Mecca agreement, more defense sales for China. Very simple. The Iran war has highlighted the centrality of drones, missiles, and air defense for Gulf security. China is well positioned to compete in that market. It can offer relatively affordable armed drones, air defense systems, and increasingly local production and technology partnerships. The Mecca Pact could make such possibilities more attractive. Greater defense coordination among Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey may create demand for interoperable systems, shared training, and industrial cooperation. Pakistan's longstanding use of Chinese equipment gives Beijing an inside track in one member state, while Saudi Arabia's reported drone production plans could give it a larger industrial foothold in another. So that is So altogether here, what do we see? We see that China is getting more and more involved in the Middle East in a security way, in a military production way, and the diversification of partnerships that it serves Chinese interests. And this is something we have to really keep an eye out for. And it all comes back to where we are right now with this Iran war. China is defiantly standing up and saying, we're not part of this. We're not taking part in this. But they're also, deepening their relationships with these Arab states, these Muslim states. So this has to be watched very carefully. We know what a threat China is, and China's, their strategic goal is to take down the United States, and they certainly are. They're also no friend of Israel. So this is all something to be concerned about and to watch closely. And maybe we'll come back to this topic as we see more headlines on it. So keep watching. Thanks for watching. Please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you thought of this one. I know it ran a little long, but this was an important topic. We had to get to everything. All right. God bless.